What is up? Good morning. What's up, everybody? How you guys doing? Hold on, let me open up a window really quick. We're gonna wait for people to come in. I'm gonna open up a window, try to get more light in here. The sun is in a state of death right now, so the days are getting darker. The days are getting colder. It's time for that sad energy, that seasonal affective disorder energy to come through. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We got a lot going on today. Oh, let me turn this light down real quick. This light's a little bright. Hold on. I gotta turn this down real quick. This pink light. The sun is dying, like I was saying. Someone said the sun is actually shining up here in Minnesota. It's 55 degrees. Wasn't sure you're going to do the live, so happy. Oh yeah, I'm definitely doing the live, my love. We're tapped in. Okay, got to give you guys a weekly update. We got a lot going on this week in astrology with the stars, and there's a lot going on energetically. I pulled some cards today just to kind of get a vibe of where the collective is at energetically. And there's like a collective exhaustion right now. Like people are feeling mentally, emotionally, spiritually tired, and people are feeling in a way a little kind of like there's like this sense of like aimlessness. There's like this sense of preparation and anticipation and anxiety for what's to come, but there's like this unknown energy that's coming, or this like we're stepping into a new world. We're in transition right now. Reality is on the verge of like going through a major death and a rebirth. There's just like a lot of collective angst right now, and there's a lot of like nervousness, and there's a lot of unknown, and we really need to honor this like energetic space that not only we may be finding ourselves in individually, but also where we're in collectively, because there's like this collective shedding. There's like a collective die-off happening with the world or with society as we know it and with culture. And the economy, the way money works, the way that we work, the way that we do jobs, the way that we show up in the world, whatever career means, whatever ambition means, all those things are going through a state of like death and rebirth. Everybody coming in, thank you for being here. Welcome. So we're gonna be tapping into astrology the week ahead. Like I was saying, I pulled some cards just to kind of tap into the collective energy. And like I was saying, is we're in this collective state of like angst and nervousness and transition, and there's like a lot of things dying right now. So, we have an economy that's dying. We have a like the way society has globally been structured, like capitalism, democracy, government, like these things are in a state. Thank you, my love. Everybody, welcome the Hood Healer. Say hi, Imani. She's here hanging out with us. We're in a collective state of like death and endings right now. And I think what's really important for those of us that are empathic and intuitive and sensitive, like myself, we kind of, oh, those of us that are oracles, we're energetic oracles, we tap into the collective energy and we can kind of like feel where it's going. We can feel what's happening. It's very important right now that you detach if you need to for self-care, because we can end up mistaking the truth that society and the world that we know of is going through a death and a rebirth, or is going through like this collective like upheaval, and we can mistake that for like a personal thing, or we can internalize that and make it like, oh my God, my life is in crisis. Oh my God, I'm going crazy. Oh my God, like, what's to come? Like, and so I want you to be very discerning right now. I want you to be very discerning at this period of time, with whether or not you're tapping into this collective energy and that's what you're feeling, or if you are actually individually experiencing that in your own life, like this like transition, this like ending, this like rebirth. Because I've been getting a lot of messaging from a lot of people, a lot of my clients and other spiritual workers and stuff, that there's like a burnout that's happening, like an energetic burnout collectively that's happening. And we got to be this, we have to be very cautious of internalizing all this like frantic, chaotic, you know, tragic, dare I say tragic energy, and making it like personal. that doesn't mean though that doesn't mean that we diminish our own individual experience of this like collective ending that we're going through, right? But we got to make sure that for those of us that are empathic, intuitives, we're oracles, we got to be discerning and we got to be able to separate our energy from the collective so that we can still maintain our focus, we can still maintain our mission, we can still maintain the goals, the dreams, the vision. So, right now, like what's happening in the collective is we're seeing timelines that are very that have different goals where there's people that are fighting for timelines right now. We're in this place where there's certain people that are trying to control a narrative, control a story. They're using the media, they're using, they're using mass media, they're using money, they're dumping money, they're using politics, they're using all they're just trying to they're using different things to try to steer the narrative in a story in a certain way, but we have to maintain our own goal and vision for the reality and for the future that we want to build, that we want to create. And we got to stay true to the mission, especially those of us that have been sent here with a spiritual mission, with a global mission. We're here to be a beacon of light. We're here to be bringers of hope. We're here to be bringers of magic, right? We're here to show people that there is truth, there is intuition, there is the divine guidance, there is God, there is spirit, there's something greater than us and then this like basic experience that we're going through, right? We have to maintain the goal, we have to maintain the vision, we have to maintain the dream, we have to keep people focused, okay? And it's important that you individually you keep yourself energetically clear right now at this time. One of the things I do want to say, and this is something that I've been picking up on for a lot of people, is there's a lot of like spiritual, psychological, energetic, emotional, like co-opting that's trying to happen right now. I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know if the like powers that be are doing collective dark spiritual work or something. I don't know what it is. It could just be an energetic thing and a frequency thing. Um, but there's been like there's energies that are flowing out in the collective right now that are being emitted in the collect into the collective energy that are trying to lead people astray right now. That are trying to confuse us. That are trying to um, get us to doubt ourselves. They're trying to get us to go back to toxic habits and behaviors. They're trying to keep us stuck in some type of way. And, it's really important that this month, during this Scorpio season, we got to double down on our spiritual and emotional convictions. We got to kind of double down on our practices because there is this kind of really unhealthy collective toxic energy that's trying to like sour, is trying to pollute, or is trying to confuse. And I want to make you guys very aware of this because we may be, you know, experiencing like mental, emotional disconnect or frustration, or we may be feeling overwhelmed, or maybe feeling like we're in an energy of crisis and stuff. But I just want you to be very mindful and be like, where is that energy coming from? And is that energy my own, or is this stuff that I'm absorbing from the media? Is this stuff I'm absorbing from my neighbors, from the people I'm surrounded with? Is this stuff that I'm absorbing from the television shows, right? From being on Twitter and being on Instagram. So it's important that we need to maintain energetic clarity and maintain our energetic battery right now. And we just maintain like discernment, energetic discernment right now. Okay. Very important. I just got to tell you guys this. Okay. Because I pulled some cards this morning. I got the Seven of Swords in reverse, the Four of Cups in reverse, the Three of Cups in reverse. And to me, this is giving collective anxiety, collective sadness, collective grief, and also collective frustration. And I think that's another thing is like a lot of people have been feeling very inspired. They've been feeling very energized, but they don't know what to do with that energy. Don't worry about it. You're going to know what to do with that energy soon. Okay. But right now, you just got to kind of sit with it. You got to put it to work in your own individual life, in your own individual way, because eventually, collectively, we are going to be utilizing this energy, okay, for different things, okay, for the revolution, okay, for change. We're going to be using this energy to fight back, okay, but it's like we're not there quite yet, okay. So we're going to be talking about a few things this morning. We got a lot going on this week. I'm going to go over. I'm gonna give you guys a brief rundown of the transits of this week that are important. and then we're going to talk about them individually, and then we'll go into like the actual week, okay? So we got our full moon in Taurus that's coming up. Good morning, welcome. Thank you for being here. Um, my name is Louie, by the way. I am an intuitive astrologer and tarot reader, and I do my own version of astrology that I call karmic astrology. Because what I kind of do when I do readings for people is I kind of read into like their soul, and I kind of read into their karmic plan, their karmic destiny. Like, what is their soul here to learn in this lifetime? And I also get a lot of past life downloads for people intuitively when I'm looking at their charts and stuff. This is also when I do tarot, so. I don't consider myself like a regular astrologer or tarot reader. I really feel like I'm reading into people's souls. I'm reading into your karmic soul's path when I do readings, whether it be with astrology or tarot. And that's one of the things I'm becoming more aware of with the way that I do my work and the gifts that I've been given. Okay. But, anyways, let's get back to the astrology of the week. So, we have our full moon in Taurus on Wednesday, November 5th. It's going to be at 5:19 a.m. Eastern Time and 8:19 a.m. Pacific Time. This is going to be a very powerful full moon, okay? This moon is actually one of the closest moons. It's a super moon. It's going to be one of the closest moons that we have to Earth. So if you actually are able to see the full moon up close and personal, it's going to be huge. And it's going to, when the moon is really close to Earth, we feel it more intensely. The full moons that are during Taurus season and Scorpio season tend to be very, very powerful. The reason being is because the moon exalts in Taurus and the moon is fallen in Scorpio. So the moon does incredibly well when it's in the sign of Taurus, and the moon struggles. It deals with a lot of emotional turmoil typically when the moon's in Scorpio. And you can ask anyone that has a moon in Taurus and a moon in Scorpio, you can ask them about their lived experience. You can ask them about their childhood. You can ask them about their past, and they're going to give you two very different and extreme experiences. So we have the signs of Scorpio and Taurus that are on the same axis, right? We have our full moon in Taurus coming up, which is going to be the sun in Scorpio and the moon in Taurus. So we have a life-giving moon during this full moon coming up on Wednesday, okay? The moon's exalted extra strong with the sun that's in the sign of death, where the sun is the life giver, right? The sun is the life bringer. So what we get during, our full moon in Scorpio that happens in Taurus season, and our full moon in Taurus happens during Scorpio season, we get this tension and this friction between the polarities of life and death, okay? And we have to ask ourselves what this full moon in Taurus. I'm gonna go into depth with this when I do a full moon in Taurus live. I believe tomorrow, or I'm gonna do it Wednesday morning. I'll let you guys know. But the moon in Taurus is gonna ask us, what do we need to pour life into? What do we need to continue to invest our energy, our money, our resources, our time into? What makes us feel emotionally safe? What makes us feel emotionally abundant? What makes us feel emotionally secure and stable? Okay. Where the sun opposing that, okay, opposing the moon in Taurus, is asking us to purge, to release, or let go of certain identities or certain aspects of ourselves, right? Sun in Scorpio, the sun is about the self, the sun is about ego, the sun is about how we are, how we show up in connection, how we show up in relationships, right? What do we need to purge or release or let go of within ourselves to allow the abundance of the moon in Taurus, of the full moon in Taurus, to really to prosper or to grow, or to flourish in some type of way, right? So this kind of polarity between the sun and the moon in Scorpio and Taurus is really this tension between like life and death. And it's really going to ask us, what do we need to release or purge, not only within ourselves but also within our life in general? Like, maybe there's unhealthy habits and behaviors, maybe there's unhealthy relationships, there's unhealthy connections. But many times we ask ourselves, or when we're talking about the sun in Scorpio, when we're talking about Scorpio energy and that balance between Scorpio and Taurus, we tend to think like, oh, I got to purge something, I got to let something go, something's got to die. But also, there's a possibility of redemption. So there's a possibility of something going through an ending going through what looks like a death or what feels like a death, but it's actually going through a process of transformation and change and evolution. And that can be a very, very scary thing because one of the things I talked about last week with Scorpio season is a season where everything dies, right? Where the leaves start to fall, where the sun goes into the underworld, right? If we think about Scorpio being connected to Hades, modern ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. The traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars, right? So you put the sun in the underworld, and the sun has to go through some kind of transformation and change and some kind of death and rebirth. But I don't want us to get confused because sometimes we can be like, oh, it's Scorpio season. It's time to just burn bridges. It's time to just throw everything out and throw everything away. But ask yourself, what in my life actually just needs composting? What in my life can is not necessarily dead, but just needs to go through some kind of evolution or some kind of transformation and change. I think Mars people, Scorpio, Aries people, people that are very Pluto, very Mars, and even you may see this if you're someone that has Pluto on the ascendant, Pluto conjunct your moon, or you have Mars on the sun, you have Mars on your rising, right? You may be a Pluto Mars person as well. They're so quick to just burn a bridge. They're so quick to just blow something up and be like, fuck it. You know what? Like, this ain't working for me. I don't like the way you're making me feel. And they just will go ahead and just burn a bridge and they'll just blow something up and they'll just destroy something instead of giving it an opportunity to transform and evolve and change. So I think what's really important with this full moon in Taurus this week is that coming up on Wednesday is we got to ask ourselves what in our life may and something may need to die. Something may need to come to an abrupt end or something. You may need to purge something, right? But also, more importantly, I think what just needs to go through a state of metamorphosis or evolution or transformation, right? And where does something need to just dramatically, intensely change? And how can that change feel like a death and a rebirth? But it's not. It's actually just a process of evolution or a process of growth, right? Because this full moon in Taurus wants to bring like new life. I know it's a full moon and full moons are about release, but full moons are also about culmination and realization. Full moons are when things come to harvest, right? And so we have a very abundant full moon in Taurus that's ruled by Venus in Libra, who's still in Libra. Venus is in her rulership, right? She's really strong. So I do think that this full moon is going to be bringing an element of prosperity, an element of abundance, an element of possibly reconciliation. But we have to also keep in mind that the sun is in Scorpio, right? The sun is still calling us to purge and transform and change and evolve things in some type of way, even though the moon's in its exalted state being ruled by Venus, who's very, very strong. So this is a beautiful full moon to get into alignment with your values, to really put energy and time into things that make you feel good, the things that make you feel valued or appreciated, the things that make you money, the things that bring life and abundance, okay? It's so interesting how we have these full moons, right? In the middle of the season of life, Taurus season, we have a full moon in Scorpio with the fallen moon, right? In the middle of, the season of death, Scorpio season, we have this full moon that's like life-giving, right? So it's just this kind of contradiction or this tension between life and death is something that's so fascinating that we get with the axis of Scorpio and Taurus. But the moon in its exalted state, I do think this is going to be a very abundant full moon. And we'll talk more about that full moon either tomorrow or on Wednesday morning. I'm kind of feeling like Wednesday morning we'll talk about that full moon in detail, okay? So that's our first event. The other thing that we have happening this week, we have a few things astrologically. We have Mars going into Sagittarius. And let me tell you, Mars being in Jupiter's sign, so Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Mars loves being in Sagittarius. Actually, Mars does pretty well in fire signs in general, but when Mars is in Sagittarius, we start feeling more inspired, more courageous, more brave, and we feel more expansive. We feel more ready, more prepared, more willing to take on challenges that are, that are challenges that maybe we've been afraid to. deal with before. So maybe there's like certain conflicts or certain tensions or certain things that we've been struggling with or that we've been dealing with, even like actions that we've been afraid to take, you know? But when Mars moves into Sag starting tomorrow, we're like, all right, let's get it going. Like, let's go ahead and expand, let's grow, let's reach for our goals, let's reach for our dreams. I always think of Mars and Sagittarius because Sagittarius is a sign ruled by Jupiter. Mars in Sag gives it's the conquering Mars. It's the Mars that's like manifest destiny, right? So manifest destiny is this idea, for those of you that don't know American history, was this idea that God gave us the right to expand and grow. So this is like what happened in like, when with the United States during like, the gold rush and stuff. There's this idea that the Christians came up with it at this time, like in 1800s, that we have manifest destiny, that we have this God-given right to expand and grow and take land and like conquer and like explore. And there was like, the American settlers when they first colonized the United States, they had this idea of manifest destiny, like I can go ahead and take it. I can go ahead and, search for it. I can go ahead and quest for it because it's part of my God-given right. And that's very much what Mars and Sagittarius is about. Mars and Sagittarius is like, I believe that this is mine. I believe that this is what God wants for me. I believe that this is what's right or this is for me. And so I'm going to go ahead and take it. I'm going to go ahead and get it. I'm going to go ahead and quest for it. I'm going to go ahead and fight for it. Right. So, this idea of Mars and Sagittarius, the expansive nature and the questing nature and the seeking nature of Sagittarius meets the action, the will, the desires of Mars, right? And Mars and Sagittarius is going to be really good for fire signs, especially. So if you are a Sag or a Leo or an Aries, and you've been feeling like your energy's been a little off, you've been feeling a little tired, you've been feeling a little exhausted, you've been feeling a little depleted. A lot of the fire signs have been feeling this. A lot of the Aries, Leo, Sag people have been feeling exhausted. They've been feeling tired. They've been feeling drained. They've been feeling like they're like being brought to the past, or they're stuck in the past, or they're having to feel all these emotions that they typically don't want to feel. The reason being, why is this? Well, that's because there's been a grand water trine in the sky, and there's been a lot of placements in water signs, right? We had the sun, Mercury, and Mars. Well, Mars is at 29 degrees Scorpio today, but we had Mercury and Mars in Scorpio up until last week. Oh, we had Mercury in Scorpio up until last week. We had Mars in Scorpio up until tomorrow. Right, we have Saturn and Jupiter in water signs. Jupiter's in Cancer, Saturn's in Pisces. Right, the Sun has been in Scorpio, so we've had a lot of this water energy, which is houses 4, 8, and 12 for fire signs. Right, so water energy is not really activating for fire signs. But now that Mercury's been in Sag as of last week, Mars is moving into Sag this week. Now that Mercury and Mars are in Sag, we're gonna start to see a lot of the fire signs getting their chutzpah back, getting their inspiration, getting their feistiness back. Okay. Also, with Mercury and Mars in Sagittarius together, this is going to activate the mutable signs heavily. So, if you're a mutable sign, a Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, if you have that in your big three, if you have that in your rising, especially if you have a mutable rising, Mercury and Mars is entering houses 1, 4, 7, or 10 for you. Okay. Based if or Mercury Mars is going to be meeting up with your sun, with your moon, aspecting your sun, your moon, but the square, conjunction, and opposition if you're a mutable sign. So with Mercury and Mars together in Sagittarius, this is a lot of intense, frustrating, argumentative energy. This is us arguing or fighting for our beliefs. This is us feeling like we got to cuss someone out. This is feeling like we got to throw hands. Okay. This is arguments at our Thanksgiving dinner over beliefs because one person voted for, Trump and the other person voted for Kamala, right? So we just need to be very mindful this week with Mars entering Sagittarius and Mercury and Mars being co-president, being in the same sign together in Sag. Be very mindful of this energy. I think this Mercury, Mars, and Sag together starting this week is a beautiful energy for going to the gym, for working out, for taking on some kind of new some taking on some kind of new direction or taking on some kind of new journey or it's good to put this energy into like a new hobby or new hobby, new routines, something like this. All right. With Mercury, Mars, and Sagittarius. Um, we also want to be very mindful of what we're saying and how we're moving in our connections and in our relationships with others with Mercury, Mars, and Sagittarius because you know, this energy is going to make us feel more impulsive. It's going to make us feel like we're not going to really be thinking about our words or running our words through a filter so we can accidentally say something or we can be, be more impulsive with our decision making. We could hurt someone's feelings unintentionally by just speaking our truth. Mercury and Mars together in Sagittarius, there's this energy of really speaking your truth, being honest, speaking from the heart, but also really speaking your convictions, speaking your beliefs, right? So I think it's really important that we are mindful with Mercury, Mars, and Sagittarius. We're very mindful of what we're saying and what we're doing, and we're very intentional. We want to like slow down. The best part when Mercury and Mars are transiting together, when Mercury and Mars are sitting close to one another, and we're gonna have this dance between Mercury and Mars because Mercury is gonna slow down and go retrograde. So Mars is gonna catch up to Mercury, and Mercury and Mars are gonna meet each other as Mercury goes backwards, Mars continues to go forward in Sag. So we're gonna have this kind of energy of Mercury and Mars together. But one of the things we want to be mindful of is, you know, impulsive decision making, speaking our truth, or saying things that could be very cutting or very, hurtful or painful without a filter, without slowing ourselves down or something like this. Okay, so we just want to be very mindful of that with Mercury and Mars and Sagittarius. So Mars goes into Sag tomorrow, and Mars is going to be in Sagittarius until December 15th. So he's like moving, he's picking up speed. Let me get my tea real quick. Mm. We got some dandelion tea right here. Delicious. Somebody asked how my birthday was. My birthday was amazing. Thank you for asking. I appreciate you. So we got that going on this week. So we have Mercury. Oh, wait, actually, let me put this down over here. I don't want to put it by the window because I got the window cracked a little bit. Let some fresh air in here. So, all right. Mercury and Mars and Sagittarius. Full moon in Taurus on Wednesday. Okay, what's the other thing that we got to talk about? Uranus goes back into Taurus on November 8th on Saturday. So Uranus is at 29 degrees. We have some very interesting anaretic degree stuff happening. We have Neptune at 29. Uranus is going back to 29. We have Pluto at 1 degree. When we have the planets at these anaretic degrees or these degrees of crisis, we this tells us that as a society, as a culture, as a peoples, as a humanity, we're going through change. We're going through a timeline transition. And it can be a little confusing because we're like at with these big with Uranus, and Neptune dancing around 29 degrees and the first degree, zero first degrees of the next sign and the last degrees of the previous sign, right? It's like we're feeling this timeline transition, but it's very clunky. It's very awkward. It's very weird. It's very funky. It doesn't feel comfortable. There's an energy right now, a collective energy that is not going to be settled. Like it's a very unsettling energy. It's a very unstable energy. It's a very unsafe energy when the planets are dancing, especially the outer planets like Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, when they're dancing around these beginning degrees and degrees of signs. Okay? And it's extremely rare. This is something I've said before. It's extremely rare that you have the three outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all go into new signs, ingress into new signs at the same time at this during the same year. It's very rare that this happens. This is like not it's like for a triple for these three outer planets with these really long cycles, right? Pluto has like a 20-year cycle, Neptune has a 14-year cycle, Uranus has a 7-year cycle, 7.5, 8-year cycle. It's really rare for all of them to transition into new signs at the same time. But not only that, they are also aspecting each other. they're also aspecting each other. So Uranus is trining Pluto, and Neptune is forming this sextile with Pluto and Uranus. So it's one thing for them all to go into new signs at the same time, and it's another thing for them to also be talking to each other and exchanging energy with each other by aspecting each other, right? The fact that we have this happening right now, the fact that we have this happening this year, and it's like gonna be it's gonna continue to be an ongoing thing, even going into 2030, right? It's incredibly rare. This is why these times feel so dramatic. They feel so intense. It feels like time is speeding up. It feels like the level and the amount of change is overwhelming. It's because of the fact that Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus are dancing around these last degrees of these signs, and they're ingressing into new signs, right? So with Uranus going back into Taurus, though, Uranus back at 29 degrees, he has to finish up his work of whatever he's been trying to do, in either in our individual life, but also what he's been doing collectively in Taurus over the last 7 years, right? Has he been in Taurus since for 7 years? Yeah, I think he's been in Taurus since 20 what? 2018? Hold on, let me look at something real quick. Oh yeah, 2018, yeah. I was right. Yeah. So, yeah, May 15th of 2018 is when he went into Taurus. Yeah. So, he has to finish his work in Taurus. And what has he been doing in the sign of Taurus? He's been changing our money. Right? We've got cryptocurrency now. We're seeing coins and fiat currency and like physical currency is becoming outdated. It's like, it's going away. He's been changing our relationship with money, our relationship with resources as well. In some ways, he's also been changing our relationship with work, Uranus and Taurus. So, the way that we thought about jobs and work and career and money and our value system, the way that we thought about this 8 years ago to where we're at now in 2025 is totally different. It's our world that we know of when it comes to security and stability and money and finances. The world that we know of has totally been turned upside down. We've been brought into the future, right? The future is cryptocurrency. The future is, management of resources. The future, the wealth, I think Uranus and Taurus has really showed us, the way the government and the way the big corporations are moving, that wealth is really about resources. And wealth is really about resource control. Who has access to the water? Who has access to electricity? Who has access to food, right? And on that token as well, we've also seen a lot of advancement with food. We're seeing a lot of synthetic food. We're seeing a lot of, we've seen in some ways like, more intense forms of genetically modified food. We have, artificial meats. We have them growing meat out of cells now, like, farm, like, what is it? Lab raised, lab grown meats and things like this. Just really weird, funky stuff with food. Because Taurus is the sign of food and Uranus is about technology and bringing things into the future. But, there's some things that we also have to realize that with Uranus and Taurus, there's some things that we shouldn't be experimenting on, or there's some very natural Taurus processes that we shouldn't be tampering with or playing with, right? But what I do want to say with Uranus back in Taurus, though, is we're finishing up what Uranus and Taurus has been kind of how Uranus and Taurus has been evolving humanity in our relationship with food, our relationship with the material world, our relationship with money, what money looks like, how money is structured, how money is organized, how money manifests, things like this. But also, I think collectively, I really want you to go think about 2018 to now for you individually. I want you to think about how your value system has changed in the last 8 years, 7 years, 7 years. How has your value system changed? If you think back to 2018, think about the things that you wanted back then, and think about where you're at now, and think about the things that you want now. Think about how different your values are from 2018 to 2025. The things that you wanted before, the ways that you wanted to make money before, your relationship with money, possibly your diet, your relationship with food. Think about how all those things have evolved and transformed and changed dramatically in the last 7 years since 2018, right? And so with Uranus back in Taurus and him wrapping up his transit there over the next, few months, I think it's important that we really honor what has changed in terms of our values, in terms of what we want for ourselves, in terms of how we want to make money. And also, like, I think Uranus and Taurus is going to, someone said farmers protesting, speaking up. Yeah, Uranus and Taurus, we're going to start to see more rebellion and more, not more. We're going to continue because it's already been an ongoing narrative with Uranus. Uranus just dipped his toes into Gemini this year. But with Uranus and Taurus over the last 7 years, it's been this ongoing narrative of like farmers and human rights when it comes to access to food and laws protecting organic food and natural food from genetically modified foods and things like this, right? Like I think we're gonna continue to see more with Uranus back in Taurus, more lawsuits or more rebellion or more people speaking up, like farmers speaking up, food industry people speaking up and stuff like that against like, mass agriculture and stuff like this. I think that's going to continue to be a theme. So we just want to pay attention to that. If you are someone that has anything at the last degrees of a fixed sign, so if you have anything around 29 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Leo, I want you to be very mindful of this Uranus energy. Let me see. What degree does Uranus go back to? I think he goes back to 27. Oh yeah. So Uranus is gonna he goes back to 27 degrees. So if you have anything around 29 to 27 degrees of a fixed sign, you're wrapping up your Uranian breakthrough transit. Okay, which is probably something you've been experiencing. The fixed signs, Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, Leo, have been really the last 7 years with Uranus and Taurus has really been waking them up to like truth and authenticity. And that's one of the things that Uranus asks us to do, right? He asks us to be authentic and true to ourselves. He asks us to be independent. And if we are feeling trapped, if we're feeling stuck, if we're feeling, bored in our life, Uranus usually comes through energetically to free us or emancipate us or to, put us through a tower moment to get us to move forward in some type of way. So, if you're a fixed sign, I want you to think about, what the last 7 years have looked like for you and think about, what dramatic change you've gone through that Uranus has kind of instigated, right? I'm thinking for me, when in 2018, 2019, when Uranus just went into Taurus, I have early degree Sun, Mercury, and Pluto in Scorpio. Uranus opposed me. So Uranus was opposing my Sun and Mercury in Scorpio in like 2018, 2019. And that's when I left banking, and that's when I got into astrology, and that's when I started studying and learning all this stuff. So, Uranus, he has a way of aligning us with truth and authenticity, but Uranus also has a lot to do with higher wisdom, divination, and also like technological insight or even like genius, like divine insight. You see Uranus very strongly placed in people that are incredibly intelligent or they're a genius in their own way when it comes to their chosen profession or when it comes to their curiosities or their passions. So, we tend to think about, Uranus being associated with like technological or scientific genius, but no, Uranus is also connected to genius that is intuitive, literary genius, creative genius, right? You'll see Uranus strongly placed in the charts of classical composers like, Beethoven and Bach and things like this, where they were musical geniuses, right? That's what Uranus demands, but, that's what Uranus opens us up to the possibility. But, sometimes Uranus, being the genius that he is and being the outcast and being the rebel, his energies are also very hard to harness. and his energies can also bring us a lot of chaos and a lot of destruction. There's a lot of Uranian people that have, if people have a really strong relationship with Uranus, or Uranus is really strongly placed in their chart, they have very frantic nervous systems. They have a very chaotic mind. Their emotions tend to be very turbulent, and they can also be very self-destructive, but they can also kind of be very combative. So the thing with Uranian people is they don't want to fit in. They don't want anyone telling them what to do. And sometimes they have this disdain for society and for a community, As much as Uranus wants to be included, much of the time Uranus's story and narrative is about being ostracized and being outcasted and not being included. And so sometimes this is the price that you pay for authenticity, the price that you pay for being a genius, for being one of a kind, or being unique, or being special, right? You get punished for it. You get ostracized for it. You get attacked for it, right? Because you're weird, you're different. You think you're better than everyone else, right? You're more divinely blessed. You have more skills, more talent, more whatever, but there's also consequences that come with that sometimes with being a Uranian individual. So, if you are someone that is wrapping up your Uranus opposition, so for those of you that have Uranus in Scorpio, this Uranus in Taurus transit is going to be opposing is sorry, I was just reading something, and it kind of I lost my train of thought. My bad. All right. You're For those of you with Uranus and Scorpio, you're finishing your Uranus opposition. Okay. So if you have Uranus in Scorpio, if you have Uranus in Leo or Uranus in Aquarius, even so, those of you that have Uranus in Aquarius, you've been going through your quarter life crisis. So those of you in like between the ages of like 20 to 24, you've been going through your Uranus square. Okay, 20 to 24. And those of you that are around the age of like what 40 to 44 now, you've been going through your Uranus opposition. Well, you're wrapping that up. Your midlife crisis is coming to an end with Uranus and Taurus over the next few months. So, someone asked what a Uranian person is. So it's someone that has Uranus on the sun, on the moon, or on the ascendant. You don't have to be an Aquarius to be a Uranian person. Aquarius is um the sign that Uranus modernly rules, right? Uranus is associated with the sign of Aquarius. So Uranus and Aquarius have a lot of affinity, those signs. But you can be a Uranian person, but not have any Aquarius placements, because you can have Uranus on your ascendant, or you can have Uranus on your IC or MC, or you can have Uranus on your moon, or Uranus on your Mercury, or Uranus on your sun, or Uranus aspecting a lot in your chart. And that will make you a Uranian person, right? So, you don't necessarily have to have Aquarius placements to be a Uranus person. You can have just Uranus very prominently placed in your chart, where Uranus is doing, a lot of crazy things. For instance, I have a best friend who her mother is a Leo rising with Uranus on the ascendant. And what we see about Uranian people is they find themselves in spaces where they're usually unwelcome, and they usually have to be a pioneer, or they usually have to deal with some kind of ostracization, or they have to deal with like being the different one in the group. So you'll see, so with my friend's mom, right? She has Uranus on the ascendant in Leo. Um, she was like the first superintendent, the only and first black female superintendent of like LA school district, something like this. She was like, so what we see with Uranian people, which is similar to Martian people too, like Mars people, especially Aries people, is they're like pioneers, and they're gonna be the first, or they're gonna like be in spaces where they're typically not included, where they typically get outcasted or ostracized, but they force themselves in those spaces anyways. And they like pioneer the way, and they like make a way for themselves, right? They love indifference. And I think that's the thing about Aquarius, and that's the thing about Uranian people. They love they love experiences where people tell them, oh, you can't. And they're like, well, I'm gonna do it anyways. Watch. I can watch. They love that. They love kind of going against the grain. They love doing something out of the norm. They love going against society's expectations or culture's expectations in some type of way, right? So what you'll see is many times, Saturn or Aquarius people, Uranian people, even Saturn's like this too. Saturn can be like this. You tell them not to do something, not to wear something, not to pursue something, not to achieve something, and they're gonna be like, "Watch me." They take it as like a test. They're like, "Oh, you told me not to wear this? Well, guess what? Not only am I gonna wear it, but I'm gonna double down on it." Like, that's a very Uranian. It's this. They have this quality, this. There's something within them that loves to defy, that loves to defy other people's expectations, that loves to resist authority, that loves to challenge the status quo, challenge the norm. There's something within them. And they just have this deep inner passion and this drive to be like, nope, I'm going to do something different. Nope, I'm going to do this. Nope, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to go against what you said. And they can even just sometimes do it just to be devil's advocate and piss people off. That's a very Uranian thing. So yeah. So anyways, Uranus going back into Taurus. You're those of you with Uranus and Scorpio, you are wrapping up your Uranus opposition, and we are wrapping up our Uranus and Taurus lessons. Whatever Uranus has been doing in our Taurus house over the last 7 years, we're that's coming to completion. Uranus will be ingressing back into Gemini to continue his 7 year journey through the sign of Gemini starting next year. I do believe it's gonna be in February, but let me just double check my math really quick. Hold on, give me a second. He goes to 27 degrees Taurus, and then he goes direct on. It's like gonna be the last day of January. Watch, I bet you. It's like February 1st. Let me get the exact day. Hold on. I gotta do some math real quick. February 2nd to the 3rd, around there, the 2nd to the 3rd, he goes direct. And he's gonna go back into Gemini in the ensuing months. So I do believe so Uranus goes direct around February 2nd, February 3rd, of 2026. He goes direct in the sign of Taurus at 27 degrees. And then he ingresses back into Gemini um in May. In May of 2026. And that's when he's going to really start his 7 year journey through the sign of Gemini, starting 2026, May of 2026. Okay. So, yes. All right. So then we have that this week. So we have, okay. So what are the things that we've talked about so far? We talked about Mars going to Sag on November 4th. We talked about Mercury, who's gone into Sag as of October 29th of last week, but Mercury and Mars are going to be sitting together in the sign of Sagittarius. We talked about Uranus going back into Taurus this Saturday on November 8th. And we talked a little bit about our full moon in Taurus that's coming up on Wednesday. Okay. So, all right, let's dive into the astrology of the week. Um, let's dive in to the astrology of the week. Okay, where are we at today? Let's see. I think we have the moon in Aries right now. Yep, the moon is in Aries, opposite my Mars. That's why I was feeling irritable. I was like feeling a little irritable this morning. I was feeling a little like a little angry, a little pissed off. I was feeling a little attitude this morning. I had a little attitude. I didn't know where it was coming from. Well, it's the Moon and Aries opposing my Mars and Libra. That's what it was. So, okay, that's what it was. The Moon's been in Aries since yesterday, with a 29-degree Mars and Scorpio. So we have like the moon has been in Aries since, yeah, I think actually went into Aries on Saturday night on the first, and then the moon's been in Aries was in Aries all day yesterday, and the moon's gonna be wrapping up in Aries today, going into tomorrow morning. So we have a 29-degree Mars in Scorpio right now. Mars has been transiting a sign of Scorpio, and Mars has been instigating, has been triggering. What did I do with my hair? My hair is looking crazy. Mars has been instigating, Mars has been triggering, Mars has been activating, Mars has been initiating. I think it's a good word. A lot of different things. Since he's been transiting the sign of Scorpio. I think this Mars and Scorpio transit hasn't been as bad as it could have been, or hasn't been as unhealthy, toxic, destructive as it could have been, because Mars has also been receiving divine support and reinforcement from Saturn and Jupiter, who are in Pisces and Cancer, respectively. So Saturn and Jupiter have been forming this grand trine with Mars and Scorpio as he's been transiting the last degrees of Scorpio over the last like week and a half. So with Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in this beautiful grand trine over the last week and a half, I want you to really think about like in the water signs. I want you to take a look at your water sign houses. So I want you to take a look at your chart, look at it in whole sign preferably, okay? Because that's how I do astrology. I do astrology in whole sign. That's just me, okay? You do you. If you want to look at your chart in Placidus, you can, but it's up to you, okay? But look at the water houses. Look at the houses that are ruled by Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer for you, and see what's been moving or what's been evolving or what's been shifting or what's been changing in those areas of your life in those houses. Okay, because the sun in Scorpio is going to come in and also form this beautiful trine with the sun, with Saturn and Jupiter later on this month as we end Scorpio season and move into Sag season. But I think it's really important that we don't miss the direction or the instruction or even the activation or the passions or whatever Mars. I don't know. Mars has been revealing our passions. He's been revealing our deeper desires. He's been revealing our motives, other people's passions, other people's desires, right? This Scorpio season with Mars in Scorpio, well, Mars has been transiting Scorpio for the last like, a month and 2 weeks, the last like 6 weeks. He's been trying to reconnect us to our passions, to our desires, to our goals in a way, to our not to our, I guess I'm gonna say our goals and our dreams. I am gonna say that because Mars has been trining Jupiter and trining Saturn. So it's like Mars has been asking us like, what are we going after? What are we pursuing? What do we desire, right? What inspires us? What makes us feel passionate? But also emotionally speaking, right? Because Scorpio's a water sign. Jupiter and Saturn are in water signs. This is about our emotions. This is about our feelings. This is about our creativity. This is about, the things that make us feel inspired, make us feel motivated, make us feel passionate, make us feel excited. The things that bring us joy. That's what Mars, trine Jupiter, and trine Saturn has been trying to point us to. Mars has been trying to point us towards our joy, towards emotional satisfaction, towards a life that is passionate, towards a life that is exciting in a way, right? And that also is like emotionally fulfilling. So I think we really need to reflect as Mars is at 29 degrees Scorpio and he goes into as he goes into Sag tomorrow, we need really to ask ourselves, what has Mars been teaching us? What has Mars been showing us? What has Mars been trying to reawaken or reactivate when it comes to our passions and all the things that I've discussed? Because now that he's moving into Sagittarius, he's moving into a fire sign. He does rule Scorpio, but he's moving into a fire sign. Fire signs are about action. Fire signs are about doing the thing, right? So maybe we've been feeling it, or we've been thinking, no, not necessarily thinking about it. Maybe we've been feeling it, or we've been being pulled emotionally in a certain direction. And now it's time to follow through with wherever we've been emotionally pulled with Mercury and Mars in Sagittarius and with Mars entering the sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a very action-oriented sign. It is a mutable sign though. So one of the things about Mars when he's in a mutable sign like Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius is his energy can be pulled in a lot of different directions, or he can have a hard time focusing and staying committed to like one goal, one thing, right? And I see this a lot with Sagittarius and Gemini. It's like their energy being kind of sporadic and their energy being pushed out or being focused on a lot of different things. So we don't really reach an end goal, or a lack of focus dilutes the energy, so we burn out, right? So I think we need to be very mindful with Mars moving into Sagittarius starting tomorrow of kind of keeping our energy focused, or making sure that our energy, our desires, our passions, whatever we're exerting or whatever we're pursuing, we stay focused. We keep it if we need to, we keep it singular, or we don't just spread ourselves so thin energetically that we like burn out, or we don't like overwhelm ourselves in that type of way. Okay. I think that's very important. All right. So with the moon in Aries, okay, today ruled by this Mars and Scorpio who's about to go into Sag, um, we're kind of there's this energy of, having to fight for the things that we desire, or having to fight for the things that are very meaningful, or the things that we're passionate about. And us having to, be in an energy, if we're feeling frustrated, or we're feeling irritated, we're feeling bothered, I think we got to ask ourselves, where is that coming from? What is the source of that irritation or that frustration, right? Because probably what I'm intuitively getting is like that's probably coming from an area of your life. That frustration or the irritation is coming from an area of your life that you're not taking action around, or you're not like standing up for yourself, you're not fighting for yourself, you're not asserting yourself, you're not, taking that courageous step forward, you're not taking that brave step forward, you're not, expressing something, because we're gonna have Mercury Mars together. Maybe there's something about expression. You're frustrated or irritated that you're not expressing something or saying something or doing something about how you've been feeling. And so I think, with Mercury and Mars and Sagittarius, with Mars going to Sag tomorrow, and with Mercury, um, and with the moon in Aries, let's see, hold on, let me see something. With the moon in Aries, yeah, because then the moon goes into Taurus tomorrow around midday, around, yeah. Um, yeah, we're gonna have, it's interesting because Mars goes into Sag and the moon goes into Taurus around the same time. But with the moon wrapping up in Aries from today to tomorrow, and Mars at 29 degrees until tomorrow, today going to tomorrow, there could be this final climactic moment where we assert ourselves, or where we say something, we do something, we take action, or we feel motivated and inspired by this, moon in Aries with being disposited by 29-degree Mars in Scorpio about to go into Sag. We feel inspired and motivated to like take action and do something or address something in some type of way. Okay. So one of the things I will say though, with the moon in Aries today, by tonight, the moon is going to hit Chiron, and we also have Venus in Libra opposing Chiron in Aries. So does Venus go into Scorpio this week? Let me see. Hold on. Oh my gosh, she does. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. I missed this. I thought I got all the planetary transits for the week, but I missed this one. Venus goes into Scorpio this week. We have Venus in Scorpio as of Friday, November 7th. I missed that one. I was so focused on Uranus. Let me write that. Hold on. November 7th. Wow, we got a lot. We have Venus and Mars changing signs, y'all. This is a big week there's gonna be a lot of energetic shifts this week, okay? Venus has been in her domicile in Libra, where she has been comfortable and where she has been trying to bring balance and harmony into our relationships, and she's been revealing and showing us a lot of things, but she's about to go into her detrimental state in the sign of Scorpio, and so this is going to be very intense. We're going to start to feel very emotionally intense, with Venus and Scorpio, especially in the realm of relationships. November 7th, Venus. Okay, hold on, let me read this. Okay, and then she immediately squares Pluto. Oh, Lord Jesus. Oh, Lordy. She squares Pluto. Right when she goes into Scorpio, she squares Pluto in Aquarius. Whoa. Okay, so all right, let me get back to what I was talking about though. So with the moon in Aries, so the moon in Aries this evening, right? The moon is going to hit Chiron in Aries and oppose Venus, and Venus is separating from this opposition with Chiron in Aries. So, this weekend could have been a little intense or a little dramatic when it comes to our relationships and partnerships and also our values and things like this. There could have been some woundedness that came up this past weekend around love and partnership, or there also could have been a divine moment of healing or reconciliation this weekend with Venus in Libra opposing Chiron in Aries. But so what happens is Venus is separating from this opposition with Chiron, right? Today, Venus is at 26 degrees, where Chiron's at 24. So she's moving past this opposition with Chiron. But what happens is the moon hits this conjunction with Chiron and Aries by, let's see what time here. By 10 o'clock on the dot, I'm in my drop top, cruising the street. I like that song. Okay, by 10 o'clock, by 10 p.m. this evening, we have the moon in Aries hitting a conjunction with Chiron in their opposing Venus. So we need to be very mindful of, emotional tension and conflict, and also emotional frustration in the realm of relationships. You know, being triggered by something that someone says. If we've been feeling, undervalued or underappreciated by others, if we've been feeling some type of way in our connections, in our relationships, especially if you're a cardinal sign, if you have cardinal placements, Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, Libra. Um, we need to be mindful this evening. We need to be mindful of this moment with Venus opposite Chiron and Aries. I also think that, this is something I was saying last week. This Venus Chiron opposition is a beautiful opportunity for us to heal wounds, pre-existing wounds that we have around love and partnership. And also, if you have any narratives around, wounded narratives with love, where, someone hurt you in the past and you're still holding on to that anger, that resentment, or you're still holding on to that pain, right? You feel like you can't trust anyone. You have like a wounded relationship with the concept of love and partnership in of itself, because of past traumas and, things that you've gone through, or even, the karmic narrative of your family and the relationships that they've gone through, and your mom has always been with horrible men, and your dad has never been there, and all like, and how that shows up in your love life and your partnership life. This Venus Chiron opposition through this past weekend, that's going to be lingering in the air today, tomorrow, right? Going all the way until kind of Thursday, until Venus goes into Scorpio, resets her energy, is kind of giving us an opportunity to really heal this woundedness that we have around love, whatever general woundedness that is for us, right? So let's say we don't trust men, let's say we hate men, or we don't trust women, or we got betrayed by a woman, or, we just have this really deep wounded narrative with love and partnership. There's an opportunity for us to really go deep and heal that, but also pay attention to the woundedness, or pay attention to what is hurting in your relationships and your partnerships right now at this moment, because this could be an opportunity for you to actually say something and address something and do something about it, right? We have Mars and Mercury, but we have Mars about to go into Sag, and Mercury's in Sag already. So there's an invitation to really speak your truth and to really come clean and really tell people what you're thinking and tell people what you're feeling, right? Not to just sit on it, not to just go ahead and pretend like everything's okay, pretend like everything's, fine, right? Like, no, it's like we have to go ahead and address these problems or these issues. We got to address what we've been feeling. And we also got to karmically release ourselves from any kind of narratives or stories that we may have that is blocking us from being open to love and partnership. Someone was saying, "Oh, you're always on point. Thank you. Oh my God, I was talking to my therapist about how men have been violent to me in my life." Yeah, and that's one of the things that we get with the axis of Aries and Libra is we get domestic violence. I see this a lot with clients, especially my female clients that have the combination of Aries and Libra in their chart. They have, Libra rising, Aries rising. This axis really speaks to domestic violence in relationships and power issues, power problems in relationships, because Aries is the god of war, where Libra is the sign of peace, and Venus is the goddess of peace and love, right? And so what we get with this axis of Aries and Libra what we get with this axis of Aries and Libra is we get this narrative, this story around, war and love, or yeah, war and love, war and peace, Um, partnership comes with a certain karmic consequences with that axis of Aries and Libra. So with Chiron and the moon in Aries and Venus in Libra, we may have these experiences, these really traumatic experiences around violence and abuse and neglect and power struggles and, attacking each other and going to and relationships that are full of war and full of, anger and full of fighting and full of conflict and full of pain and full of struggle. And I mean, they're full of passion and they're exciting, but they're dramatic and they're painful and they could also be, very dangerous. So this is one of the things that, we got to release ourselves of these narratives. We got to take a look at these stories that we've experienced in our own life that we have connected to love and partnership, and we have to free ourselves from that, right? We have to let that narrative, let those stories, let those narratives go so that we can write a new story. We can write a new narrative. We can, go ahead and experience love and partnership in a way that is renewed, that is truly balanced and full of passion, but not full of pain and abuse and neglect, right? So, with Moon Chiron opposite Venus in Aries, Moon Chiron together opposite Venus in Libra is what I meant to say. I think these are things that we want to be mindful of today. This past weekend for sure, but this stuff has probably been coming up for a lot of people. But going into today and then going to tomorrow, leading into our full moon in Taurus, okay? So we have the moon wrapping up in Aries. We have Mars 29 degrees, which is it is an anaretic degree. It's kind of climactic. And then tomorrow we have the moon going to Taurus tomorrow morning. So we wrap up with the moon in Aries, and then with the moon in Taurus, we are in our full moon energy. Okay. The moon wraps up in Aries by 12 p.m. tomorrow. So the moon's at 29 degrees. The moon opposite Venus can be really nice, though, can be really sweet. That could also be very loving and very affectionate. We can have a very deep moment of revelation or epiphany, or even just have a deep emotional, moment of openness. We can have a deep emotional moment of connection tonight going to tomorrow morning with the moon Chiron opposite Venus. So the moon opposite Venus can also be very good and very sweet and very kind, and that can also be a moment of divine connection that we have with someone. So then tomorrow, right, the moon goes into Taurus, but as the moon goes into Taurus, it immediately we go into our full moon energy tomorrow with the moon going to Taurus. Okay, the moon does go into its exalted state. The moon immediately squares Pluto though. So we want to be very aware of these squares to Pluto. But the thing tomorrow that's very important energetically and astrologically. And this energy is going to be in the air starting tomorrow, and it's going to be lingering in the air like for the rest of the week. Mars goes into Sag, immediately opposes Uranus at 0 degrees Gemini. Uranus is going to go to that 29th degree Taurus, right? On Saturday. But from Tuesday, tomorrow, the 4th, until Saturday, the 7th, Mars and Uranus are in an opposition with each other. Uranus, the planet of emancipation, the planet of freedom, the planet of rebellion. Uranus, the planet of authenticity. Uranus, the planet of stress and anxiety, is opposing Mars, the planet of war, the planet of anger, the planet of individuation, the planet of fighting, the planet of passion, the planet of desire. We have Uranus and Mars in this polarity. Okay, starting tomorrow. We're already feeling it. It's been building into it. The 29 degrees to Mars today, we're already feeling it. So with Mars opposite Uranus, we want to really watch for erratic, chaotic behavior. We want to watch for people being argumentative and combative and people being easily triggered. Our nervous system is probably going to be feeling a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more trigger happy. It's going to be a little bit easier for people to push our buttons with Mars in Sag opposing Uranus and Gemini, and they're both at 0 degrees. Okay, these are very immature. 0 degrees is a very immature degree. Okay, it's a very reckless degree. It is a analytic degree, which means it's critical. Okay, So, what I will say is you want to be very, you want to slow down. You want to be very mindful of how you're navigating your energy. You want to go ahead and like breathe it through. You want to, make space for relaxation. You want to do your best to keep yourself grounded, okay? Because the the Uranus Mars opposition is going to be in the sky for the full moon in Taurus. And that Uranus Mars opposition is kind of triggering a little bit. Uranus and Gemini. Gemini is our mind. Gemini is our nervous system. Gemini is, what we think, what we say, our words, right? With Uranus and Gemini, where we've been wanting to kind of free ourselves from certain patterns of the mind, certain patterns of, certain nervous system patterns, patterns of speech, ways that we relate to others, ways that we communicate, ways that even community and stuff like that. Well, this Mars opposition, where Mars and Sag is like, we want to fight for our beliefs. We want to stand up for ourselves. We want to expand and grow and go in a new direction in some type of way. So, with the Mars opposite Uranus, we just want to be very mindful of this tension between our thoughts, Uranus and Gemini, and our actions and our beliefs, Mars and Sagittarius. This tension between, our communication patterns and speaking our truth, Uranus and Gemini opposite Mars and Mercury and Sagittarius, right? So, this is going to be a very, very sensitive thing. Someone said their moon in Pisces at 0 degrees. Yes, my love, you are going to be feeling this very, very strong. You're already feeling the Uranus square the moon. Uranus square the moon is one thing. That's a very chaotic energy. It can feel very chaotic. So with Mars joining in on the mix to square your moon, and Uranus and Mars forming a T square with your moon in Pisces, you just want to be very mindful of emotion. If you have an early degree mutable placement, if you have anything at the early degrees of a mutable sign, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, you want to be mindful of this Mars Mercury opposition. Okay, because this can literally show up as like accidental energy. This can show up as you hurting yourself at the gym. This can show up as you tripping and falling and hurting your ankle. This can show up as you getting triggered by a coworker or by a family member or by a brother or a sibling or something like this. You like go off and you argue and you fight them. Like if you have anything around the early degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, starting tomorrow, November 4th, Mars going to Sagittarius, Mars opposite Uranus and Gemini. Be mindful of how you're navigating this energy. Be very intentional. Do your best to breathe, woo-saw, ground yourself. Try to focus this energy to something productive and don't just let it cause cause a ruckus, okay? Cause destruction. All right, just be mindful of this. All right, but yeah, this is going to be a very frantic, a very nervous, a very chaotic energy. We have moon square Pluto right as Mars and Uranus form an opposition. Okay, but also if you gotta fight, if you gotta talk some shit, if you got to break free, if you got to stand up for yourself, if you feel called to, fuck that job and walk out the job and cuss out your manager and cuss out your coworkers on the way out, baby, because you're done with that place and they don't respect you and you're getting laid off anyway, so who cares? If you feel called to do that, you go do that, okay? All right. If you just need to burn some shit down, okay? With Uranus opposite Mars, you do that, okay? I'm all for a little chaos, all right? I have Uranus and Saturn conjunct in Sagittarius. I have Jupiter in Aries, and I'm a Scorpio stellium. And sometimes, you know what? We just need to wake people up. Sometimes we need a little bit of chaos. Sometimes we gotta throw a grenade here and there and blow some shit up just to remind people of who we are, okay? Just to let them know I'm not the one to be messed with. Okay, just to let them know. Listen, I was the object of value here. Okay, what are you gonna do without me? Okay. And sometimes you just gotta talk your shit, honestly. Sometimes you just need to rebel and put people in their place. Uranus opposite Mars and Sag. Sometimes you need to speak your truth. And sometimes your truth, right? Your truth is the most important thing. Not necessarily worrying about what people are gonna think or what people are gonna say or how it's gonna the price of truth sometimes is conflict. Mercury, Mars, and Sag opposite Uranus and Gemini. This is, but just mind your words, okay? Mind your words. Just be a little careful. Just be mindful, okay? You gotta be strategic. It's Scorpio season. Scorpio is a sign that moves with strategy. This is why whenever I do readings for people, I always tell them when they're talking to me about a situation, right? And they're going through something, I always ask them, "What do you want out of the situation? What is your final goal?" Because this is I'm a Scorpio. I have Sun, Mercury, Pluto, Venus, and Scorpio, okay? This is how I think. I always think about the outcome. I always think about what I want. And then I go ahead and pivot and maneuver and move in order to get the desired outcome, to get what I want, right? So, with that being said, you need to ask yourself with Uranus opposite Mars and Sag, okay, in Scorpio season, Sun and Scorpio, you need to ask yourself, what do I want out of this situation? What is my desired outcome? Okay, because many times we delude ourselves, we deny a desire, we deny an outcome, we lie to ourselves, okay, or we're just moving in a reckless way and we're not really thinking about the outcome. We're not thinking about the solution. We're not thinking about the final, the finish line. We're just moving, we're just existing, we're just maneuvering in a certain situation, and we're doing it in a chaotic way, we're doing it in a confusing way, but because we haven't really thought about where we're going and what we're doing, or we haven't really thought about what we want out of the situation. So it's really important that we take a step back, we ask ourselves before we go to war, before we assert ourselves, before we burn a bridge, before we cuss someone out and give someone our truth, we got to ask ourselves, what do I want out of the situation? What is the desired outcome? How could, what would be best for me, for this person, whatever, right? And then we can go ahead and maneuver in a certain way to accomplish that. But also, sometimes there's got to be that breaking point. Sometimes you're the one that's got to, light the fire. Sometimes you're the one that's got to strike a match. Sometimes you're the one that has to make the first move, or you got to initiate, you got to start something, you got to take action. Okay? Sometimes you got to do that. And no one else is going to do it, or you're just waiting for someone else to do it and they're not. So you got to be the one. Your Mars and Sag opposite Uranus and Gemini. So don't be afraid to take action. Just understand sometimes, there's a price and a consequence for truth, for action, for being assertive, for being intentional and things like this. But, always asking yourself, what do I want out of this situation? What can help you maneuver in certain situations to get what you want out of it, right? And if you don't know what you want, then you need to like sit with yourself. You need to ask yourself, what is it do I want? What am I doing? Where am I going? What are my goals? What are my dreams? What are my ambitions? Where's my direction? What are my desires? What do I want? Okay? Because if you don't know that, if you can't answer that question, then you're going to be living and doing and existing in a way that is very reckless and unfocused and confused. You're like your energy is not going to be going towards anything. You're not going to be investing your energy, your time, your thoughts, your emotions into anything, and it's just aimlessness. It's recklessness. You might as well just be a reed blowing in the wind. You know what I mean? You got to get to the root of what you want. You got to know what you want. You got to ask yourself. You got to sit with yourself. You have to even sometimes investigate and explore and go silent and disconnect to get clear with what it is that you want, with what it is that you desire, right? Otherwise, you're just moving aimlessly. What are you doing? You're just living, you know, with no direction, with no intention. And you're wondering why the universe ain't giving you anything. you know? What's the first thing you do for Christmas? What is the first thing you do for Christmas? You write a Christmas list and you tell Santa, I want this, I want that, I want this, right? You want the gifts, you want the greater things, and you don't even know what you want. Santa's like, okay, well, what do you want? And you're like, I don't know. I just well, figure it out. Okay, come back to me next year. Okay, make sure you get that Christmas list nice and clear it up, so I know what you want, and I know what to give you or for Christmas. Okay, because how do you expect to receive blessings from the universe, from the divine, from spirit, right? If you don't even know what you want. Right? That's got to be the starting point. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. Moon in Taurus. So the moon in Taurus. Okay, the moon's going to square Pluto tomorrow as Mercury and Mars move into an opposition with each other. So moon square Pluto can bring up some emotional intensity, some emotional volatility. What I will say is this full moon that we're going to be having, it's Wednesday morning, but the moon does go into Taurus on Tuesday. The moon in Taurus is good though. So the moon in Taurus, we're going to be feeling pretty good. The moon's in an exalted state. The Venus is also at 27 degrees, excuse me. Venus is also at 27 degrees. One of the things that you want to, we just, okay, a few things. I'm going to talk about the shadows of the full moon in Taurus, and we're going to go into more depth in this when I go over the full moon. Um, Overindulgence. Okay, doing too much of things right now. Excessive leisure, excessive pleasure, excessive spending. Okay, and us doing those things, overindulging, overspending, overeating, oversexing for some of you. Okay. Oversexing. Okay. They're doing that to cover up woundedness right now. Doing those things, overindulging, engaging in pleasure, engaging in, in the material things, in the pleasure things, as a form of compensation or as a form of cover up, as a form of to cover up woundedness, to cover up, it's like avoidance. It's like emotional avoidance. And the reason is because Venus is separating from a square with Jupiter. So Venus in Libra, squaring Jupiter in Cancer, this aspect is about overindulgence, overconsumption. Venus square Jupiter. It's about overspending and overdoing it. And it's about kind of like recklessness when it comes to pleasure and desire. But the Venus and Jupiter square has been also making this T square. Jupiter is at the apex of this T square with Venus and Chiron. So I was talking about this Venus and Chiron opposition already. I was talking about this when it comes to woundedness around love and partnerships, right? But this Venus square Jupiter, Venus opposite Chiron, and this T square that's happening between Jupiter, Venus, and Chiron is also about, yes, cultivating, someone said it, cultivating balance around pleasure and not overindulging on things that make us feel good, not overindulging on things associated with Venus, the material world, sugar, sweets, pleasure, desire, sex, but also not overindulging on victimness or overindulging on excessive emotion. Victim mentality, sadness, depression, loneliness, or even grief. you know it's like we need to be mindful of how we are experiencing our emotions, because Jupiter in Cancer squaring this Venus, is squaring this Chiron, is expanding and creating a lot of emotional intensity. But we also got to be mindful of, like, we can't lead ourselves astray by letting the intensity and the overwhelm of these emotions you know lead us towards self-sabotaging behavior, right? So this can be like, oh, I'm feeling really sad. Oh, I'm feeling really hurt. Oh, I'm feeling really wounded. So let me go ahead and grab the ice cream. Let me go ahead and reach towards the alcohol. Let me go ahead and, reach towards the hookups. And let me reach towards the sex. Let me reach towards the unhealthy partner, the unhealthy ex, because I'm feeling lonely. Like, we need to be mindful of this. Okay? This week, especially with this full moon in Taurus, we need to be mindful of this. I Venus opposite Chiron, when Venus goes into Scorpio, to me it's a similar energy. It's a wounded Venus. It's Venus, when Venus goes into Scorpio on Thursday, she's really gonna have us take a look at our traumas and our triggers and our fears and all the bullshit that we've been withholding in love and partnerships and with our own worth and our own value. And what's gonna become even more evident, same similar to Venus and Virgo, but different with Venus and Scorpio. What's going to become more evident with Venus transiting Scorpio starting on Thursday over the next 3 weeks is what we're not emotionally getting in our relationships, what we have been emotionally denying. If there's been any dark, hidden emotions that we've been repressing. So let's say we've been holding on to resentment. Let's say we've been holding on to jealousy. We've been holding on to mistrust. We've been holding on to like these really intense emotional energies. Well, with Venus going to Scorpio on Thursday, all these energies we're gonna feel like bringing them to the surface. We're gonna feel like saying something and doing something and acting upon it, especially with Mercury and Mars together in Sagittarius. So, I want you guys to prepare if there's, if you're someone that's in a relationship, you're in a situationship, or even you've been feeling a certain type of way emotionally when it comes to your friends or your family members or your baby daddy or whatever. I want you to be very mindful of this Venus going to Scorpio on Thursday, right after a full moon in Taurus, because, there's stuff that's being brought to the surface. There's stuff that's being regurgitated. There's stuff that's going to be drudged up that we feel like we got to address during this full moon and Taurus cycle. Okay. You've been holding on to regret while feeding. You gotta let that go, my love, okay? This full moon in Taurus is a beautiful opportunity tomorrow or I'm sorry, Wednesday morning. Starting on Wednesday, we have a our 2 week full moon in Taurus cycle. It's a beautiful opportunity to let go of these outdated emotions that you're storing in your body that are only going to create illness and sickness. The moon's going to be really, really strong. So with the full moon in Taurus, you know what I'm kind of getting? I'm getting a download actually. It's not about just purging or releasing these emotions. It's about turning them into something beautiful, turning them into new life. You know? So it's like, can we turn regret into compassion and acceptance? Can we turn, you know, Can we turn mistrust into forgiveness? Can we turn betrayal into acceptance and peace? Right? It's about transmuting these energies and turning the shadows and the darkness and the pain and the woundedness and the trauma of these emotional experiences into something good. It's like we got to turn them into like a lesson. We don't go through these things without reason, right? Once we really start to understand ourselves on a deep level and we start to understand spiritually that every person, every experience that we go through in our life, and every person, every relationship, everything that we go through is meant to teach us a profound lesson, we could detach from the emotional experience of it and we can allow ourselves to kind of see what in that experience was meant to teach what in that experience was meant to teach me something, right? How was that experience meant to evolve me, meant to change me? Even though it hurt, even though it was wounded, even though it ended in betrayal, even though it ended in heartbreak, even though like whatever our narrative is around it, whatever our story is around it, how can I integrate this experience, not become a victim of it, not give it away, give my power away to it, but how can I integrate this experience into my emotional body, into my spiritual, into my psychological body, so it can become something good, so it can become a part of my foundation, so it becomes something that I use as a seed to grow something new, right? So this is kind of what the full moon in Taurus is going to ask us right as Venus ingresses into Scorpio. Right? How do we transmute the pain, the trauma, the fears, the triggers, the whatever into something beautiful? How do we bring life after death? What is the renewal? What does the next chapter look like? What does the redemption look like? What does the forgiveness look like? What is the does the acceptance look like? Things like this. Okay? I want you guys to think about that, especially starting on Tuesday when the moon goes into Taurus, because we are already going to be in our full moon energy on Tuesday. And the moon's going to square Pluto. So there's a lot coming up for a lot of people right now. There's a lot of deep emotional shit coming up for people right now. Saturn and Jupiter being in water signs and Pisces and Cancer are not making it any easier when it comes to emotions. There's definitely a certain intensity, a certain expansion, a certain kind of investigation. There's a certain kind of renewal that's happening with our emotional body and also the way that we relate to the past. And I really do think that this is a full moon that is giving us an opportunity to redefine our relationship with our past, to redefine our relationship with our ancestry, with our upbringing, and kind of taking a look at how those experiences, how the things of our past are continuing to inform our lived experience, and they're continuing to either positively or negatively impact our current lived experience and our relationships and the ways that we're navigating the world today, right? We really, in order to understand the future, we got to look to the past. In order to understand where we're going, we got to look to where we've been. We got to look to our patterns and things like this. And once we can see that, once the patterns, once the history, once the narrative, once the stories is revealed to us, once we kind of see the pattern, once we see what is recycling over and over, once we see the karmic generational bullshit that just, we could change it. We could change it. We could do something different. But unless we have that awareness, we're not going to be able to. Awareness is the first step. So I think it's important with this full moon in Taurus that we allow, whatever is meant to come into our awareness, we look at it without shame, without ridicule, without pain, without judgment, without victimization. We look at it, we accept it, we incorporate it for what it is, and then we move forward and we find ways to kind of use that as fertilizer. I always think of that Scorpio and Taurus axis gives me compost and fertilizer. And Scorpio is like fertilizer. Scorpio is like, okay, we're Taurus is like we're planting something new, right? We got these new seeds, and Scorpio is like the manure, the fertilizer that you put around it, right? Things that are dead or things that are whatever, that's gonna bring new life. It's all about the cycle of life, right? So ask yourself what in your emotional experiences, what in your trauma, what in your past can you use as fertilizer to plant and grow something new in your life? A new revelation, a new epiphany, a new relationship, a new goal, a new dream, a new vision, right? Like, because a lot of times it's our traumas and our triggers and all that Scorpio stuff that becomes food, that becomes fodder, that becomes, fertilizer for the new stuff. You see what I'm saying? Someone said they started composting 2 months ago. I love that for you. I love it. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. So, all right. So, Moon in Taurus. Let me keep going here. The Moon in Taurus as of Tuesday. I may be rambling, but I promise you this is going somewhere. Okay, I promise you there's something here about you. All right, so I'm looking at our full moon Wednesday morning. The moon's transiting through Taurus. We have Uranus and Mars opposite each other. So Wednesday's looking like a very intense day. I'll be honest with you guys. Wednesday is looking, it's our full moon. The moon's going to be very, very close. We have Uranus and Mars in opposition. We have Venus at 28. Mars, yeah. So the full moon is looking very intense. It's looking a little spicy. What I will say is we're probably going to be feeling a little sleeplessness. I'm looking at the full moon being disposited by Venus, who's squaring Jupiter. I'm moving to square Pluto. I'm looking at the sun being disposited by a 0 degree Mars in Sagittarius. And it's like the full moon in Taurus wants to bring stability, wants to bring closure. The full moon in Taurus wants to bring nurturance. It wants to bring us, this sense of like groundedness and peace. But we don't get that really because Mars and Mercury are opposite, or Mars and Uranus are opposite each other. So there's this energy of instability and friction and wanting to liberate oneself or free oneself or wanting to assert oneself or fight for oneself in some type of way. And then also we have Venus about to move into Scorpio, right? As she's separating from the opposition with Chiron. She's 4 degrees away from the opposition with Chiron. She's 3 degrees separated from Jupiter. I do think this is a nourishing, I don't know. This full moon feels very nourishing though. It feels very abundant for many people. It also feels like a moment of clarity, a moment of completion for people. I do think that this full moon, in some ways, I feel like this full moon, I don't know, it's giving emotional intensity, but it's not giving like a sad energy. It's giving more of like I accept that this is what it is. It's giving more of a finding closure, finding peace, finding acceptance, like coming back to one's groundedness, coming back to one's worth. That's what it's giving. It's giving more like that. It's not giving like excavation and things being pulled out of us and like grief and mourning. It's not giving that heaviness. It's giving more of a quiet and an acceptance and like a humble grace is what I'm kind of getting with this, okay? with this full moon. It's going to be at an Aries degree though, so it is at 13 degrees, which is Aries. We have Mars opposite Uranus. So I do think that typically, a full moon in Taurus, we wouldn't think of a full moon in Taurus being spicy, but this one looks spicy. This one looks feisty. This one looks kind of like intense, okay? You want to also take a look at where this full moon is hitting your chart. It's at 13 degrees. So if you have anything around 13 degrees, of a fixed sign, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo. This is going to be hitting you directly. I'll go into this on Wednesday morning when we talk about the full moon. But I do think that this full moon is going to be really good for earth signs and water signs. I think that this full moon can be very challenging for fire signs and air signs. Okay, and I'll talk more about that. I'll give y'all more deets about that on Wednesday when we do the full moon live. Okay, I'm gonna kind of do some horoscopes or for all the signs depending on your rising sign. Okay, and we'll do that. So all right, so we keep moving with the so after we come out of our full moon, right? And Venus hits her anaretic degree. So she's gonna be like at 28, 29 degrees. Ooh, so we got the rigmarole out there. I don't know. I've never seen that individual. Um, in my neighborhood, so or in my little courtyard. It's like, who's that? So we keep moving on with our from our full moon in Taurus. So we have our full moon, and then the moon starts to wane, right? But we're gonna be in the full moon energy pretty intensely. So what's so interesting about our full moon is that coming out of it, the moon on Thursday morning. So we have our full moon Wednesday morning, but then the moon on Thursday morning around 11 a.m. Pacific time goes into Gemini. So we have this abundant, grounded, kind of peaceful full moon in Taurus. Disposited by Venus and Libra. So we have an exalted moon, we have a really strong Venus, right, for the full moon. But then what happens on Thursday is the moon goes into Gemini and the moon hits Uranus. And the moon and Uranus are sitting in opposition with Mars and Mercury and Sag starting on Wednesday. So starting on Thursday, November 6th. And then also on this day, keep in mind, Venus, she's also going to be ingressing into the sign of Scorpio. Yes, around 5 p.m. Pacific time, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. So we get a very intense, dramatic shift of energy Thursday, with the moon entering Gemini, opposing Mercury and Sag, opposing Mars, and hitting Uranus. So the moon hits Uranus as it opposes Mars and opposes and moves on to oppose Mercury by around 4 or 5 p.m. Thursday, which is when Venus goes into Scorpio at the same time. So what I will say is that this is going to be a very frantic, stressful energy, possibly, or this can be a very exciting, passionate, fun energy as well. So, if you want to do something very fun on Thursday, something exciting, something that you've never done before, you want to start something new, you want to initiate something new. Let's say you want to, start a new workout plan, you want to start a new running and going on runs every morning. You want to start there's some if you want to initiate or start something, this is a good time to do it Thursday morning. But also keep in mind Mercury is entering a shadow period and Mercury will be going retrograde, right? So we do have a Mercury retrograde that's going to be starting on November 9th, which is not this week, right? No. No. Hold on, let me see. November 9th. Is that this week? No, I think it's like Monday of next week. Oh, we do have Mercury retrograde starts on Sunday. There's just a lot going on this Lord Jesus. I There's a lot going on this week. Oh my goodness. We have Mercury Sag coming up. So Mercury retrograde in Sag coming up on third on starting Sunday on the 9th. I thought it was Monday for some reason. I need to work on my Mercury. I didn't realize it was on Sunday. We have a Mercury retrograde coming up, you guys, in Sagittarius. So, um, if you do want to start something new on Thursday, you get it going, but keep in mind Mercury is slowing down to go retrograde. So, we are going to be having some pitfalls. We're going to start to go backwards. There's going to be some things that we're going to have to go back to the drawing board around. I'll talk more about that Mercury retrograde and Sag during next week's week ahead, okay? Because we're already like almost 2 hours in. Okay, so we got a lot to cover this week. But yeah, we do start a Mercury retrograde in Sag on November 9th. Okay, and I'll talk more about that next week, or maybe even this weekend. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so with on Thursday though, so with the Moon going into Gemini, hitting Uranus and opposing Mercury and Mars, this may feel like a very frantic, very chaotic, very intense energy. We could feel very overwhelmed. Our nervous system get triggered, so we just want to be very mindful. Okay, of Thursday. All right. Yes, because that's going to be a little bit of a rebellious energy. So then we keep going. We have the moon in Gemini on Thursday. So moon in Aries today into tomorrow. Tomorrow the moon goes in, tomorrow Tuesday the 4th, the moon goes into Taurus. We have our full moon in Taurus on Wednesday. The moon wraps up in Taurus on Thursday when it goes into Gemini. And then we're going to have the moon in Gemini. Um, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Yeah. Yeah. The moon's going to be in Gemini up until Saturday morning, and then the moon goes into Cancer on Sunday. So the moon in Gemini being disposited by Mercury, who's about to go retrograde. Okay, let me tell you what I'm kind of picking up. Let me tell you the down that I'm getting with the moon in Gemini starting Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or the moon in Gemini starting Thursday and then moon in Gemini on Friday and Saturday as well. I'm getting that there's going to be a lot of like cancellations of plans or a lot of redirection or a lot of people that thought they were going to be doing something, but they're going to be doing something else. So there's going to be a lot of sudden changes in choices and decision making. A lot of people that have been sitting on a certain choice or a decision, they're going to take action and like actually make the decision or choice, or they've been sitting on like thoughts or ideas, or maybe they've been sitting on words as a conversation that they need to have. And they're going to, the moon in Gemini with Uranus, Mercury, and Mars together. There's going to be this energy of like, okay, it's time to talk about the thing. It's time to take action towards the thing. It's time to address the thing. It's time to move towards the thing, something like this. But then because it's a Mercury slowing down to retrograde, there's something where we're having to pivot or we're having to refocus or we're having to go backwards or we're having to readdress something in some type of way. It can get a little funky, it can get a little wonky, it can get a little confusing. We've been in our we've been in our shadow period of Mercury retrograde, but the Mercury retrograde does start on Sunday. So, if we take action or start something or address something, from on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, on Sunday as Mercury retrogrades and going into next week, we can like pivot or we can like go back on our word or we can be like, wait a minute, that wasn't the best way to go about it, or that wasn't the best way to approach a situation, or that wasn't the best course of action. So we can end up, piggybacking in some type of way. So, if we want to wait, if you want to wait, I don't know, that's the thing though. So just use discernment, just kind of listen to yourself and see, what it is like. If there's something you got to talk about that you got to address, don't worry too much about the Mercury retrograde. Just keep in mind that the Mercury retrograde coming in after the moon goes in Gemini, Mercury retrograde coming in starting on Sunday, it may bring some kind of you may have, I don't know, may bring some kind of confusion. It may bring some kind of having to go back on something. It may bring, some kind of a piece of information from the past that all of a sudden changes things. I don't know, something like this. Okay. So just be mindful of that. Okay. All right. So moon in Gemini. What day am I on here? I'm on Thursday. I'm on Thursday. So we talked about the moon going to Gemini Thursday morning. Let's see if the moon. Oh, okay. So on, is it Friday or is it Thursday? Let's see. Hold on. Okay, yeah. So, all right. So then on Friday morning, the moon is going to square the nodes. Friday morning. I'm looking at the moon at 13 degrees. Um, around 5 a.m. So that morning we wake up with the moon square the nodes. And when the moon squares the nodes, that tends to be a time of kind of like karmic completion or fated karmic events showing up, or it's like it can be a destiny point, especially for mutable signs. Mutable signs, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius. You guys have been going through a lot of karmic development. You know, the eclipses have been going through Pisces and Virgo, have been squaring Sag and Gemini. So there's been a lot of kind of like unfolding and a lot of like movement when it comes to your narrative and your story and how this has been tied to the eclipses. Well, the moon in Gemini squaring the north node and the south node on Friday, November 7th can bring some kind of development to your karmic story or your karmic narrative and how it's tied to the nodes and what you've been going through or what you've been dealing with since the Pisces Virgo eclipses started. Um, at the beginning of this year. Well, actually, no, I do believe did we have like a Virgo or a Pisces eclipse in Sag season? Oh, no, we didn't. No, 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 no. No, I'm thinking about Virgo season of last year of 2024. You could have a certain narrative or story that goes all the way back to like September, October of last year of 2024, but the narratives, the stories around the Pisces Virgo axis for mutable signs really started this year around February, March. Well, that moon in Gemini squaring the nodes on Friday can bring some kind of karmic development when it comes to your story or comes to your narrative. Okay, so you want to be mindful of that. But also, there could be fated outcomes or destined things that we got to experience with the moon square the nodes on Friday morning. Okay, so then the moon keeps going, and the moon by Friday evening is going to square Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. So that can be a little bit of a moment of confusion. Moon in Gemini squaring Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. There can be some karmic setbacks, some karmic delays. There might be some emotional stuff that we have to confront on Friday, November 7th around evening time. Being mindful of overindulging or drinking too much or doing any, like drugs and stuff like that with the moon square Neptune, moon square Saturn, especially in the sign of Pisces. We don't want to be too delusional, self-deceptive with the moon in Gemini square Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. That can bring a lot of confusion, or that can also bring some kind of miscommunication and stuff with the moon square Neptune, moon square Saturn. That can also just be a day where, collectively speaking, some of us need rest, or some of us need, we want to connect to our spirituality, we want to connect to our faith, or we just want to be alone. That moon in Gemini is kind of asking us to be social, kind of pulling us outside. It's wanting us to connect, but also, Mercury and Mars are together. Mercury's about to go retrograde. The ruler of the moon is slowing down. He's stationed to go retrograde starting on Sunday, right? 2 days later. And the moon is squaring Saturn and Neptune who just went back to 29 degrees Pisces. So there could be some karmic lessons here associated with, our connections, our social groups, our communication. There could be things that, there could be some delays or some setbacks, or there can even just be confusion. There can be misperception of things on Friday. Venus is going to be at 1 degree Scorpio at this time, and Venus is squaring Pluto. So, I would definitely be mindful of any kind of relational experiences. I wouldn't mix, relationship drama with alcohol or substances on Friday, because Venus is at 1 degree squaring Pluto in Aquarius. The moon's in Gemini, square Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. And Mercury's in Sag about to go retrograde. So this can be very confusing for communication. This can be very confusing for decision making. This can be very confusing for relationship dynamics. There can be a lot of misperception, a lot of miscommunication and things like this. And there could also be some triggering energy. I don't know. I'm looking at Mercury and Mars within 4 degrees of each other. Uranus has just went back into Taurus. Uranus and Neptune are at 29. So there can be something around some kind of resurgence of things from the past, issues from the past. There could be someone that comes from your past, someone that you experience this weekend or that you run into this weekend that comes back from your past that triggers you. But maybe it can give you some clarity, but can also be a moment of confusion or a moment of grief or a moment of sadness. I don't know why I was seeing Moon square Saturn and Neptune and Pisces that was kind of giving me like grief or sadness or heavy emotion coming up. But I don't know. This seems like an energy that is not bringing us clarity, though. What I will say, I think this is an energy on weekend, starting on Friday, going into this weekend. This is an energy where we need to be very, very clear before we jump to any conclusions, or before we go on the attack, or before we address things. We got to be very sure and very clear, do the best that we can to be sure and clear about addressing something, or about calling someone out, or about dealing with something, or about certain conversations or something. We just got to be very mindful, because this energy can lend itself to miscommunication or misperception of events and things very easily. Okay. So then Saturday morning, the moon goes into Cancer. The moon's gonna square. The moon moves from the square, and the moon goes into Cancer. Yeah, so we wake up on Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time, and the moon's at 0 degrees Cancer. Okay. Um, and as the moon enters Cancer, she makes a beautiful trine to Venus in Scorpio. So this is a weekend with Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. We had a full moon in Taurus. This is a weekend of kind of like family gatherings and family planning. Um, what I meant by family planning, some of you may take that literally as like, oh yeah, planning to have a baby. Okay, possibly, yeah, maybe. But what I meant is more like making plans with the family, hanging out with the family, doing really fun activities with the family. I'm also thinking of the moon hitting a conjunction with Jupiter. Um, I think on Monday, actually. I think, is it Sunday evening or Monday? The moon's going to hit a conjunction with Jupiter in Cancer. And let me see. Hold on. Is it Monday? Yeah, it's going to be Monday. Yeah, it's Monday morning. That the moon hits a conjunction with Jupiter. But the moon is co-present with Jupiter in Cancer. And Jupiter is in this beautiful trine with Saturn, right? So this weekend is kind of giving a lot of emotional nourishment, especially we enter the weekend with the moon making this beautiful trine to Venus. And then the next day, as the moon hits the middle degrees, yeah, on Sunday, around 8 a.m. Sunday, the moon is trine the sun. So we have the moon trine Venus, the moon trine the sun, and then on Monday, the moon hits Jupiter and trine Saturn and Neptune, right? So we have these beautiful trines all weekend, these beautiful water trines where the moon is making a trine to Venus on Saturday. The moon is trining the sun on Sunday. The moon is hits a conjunction with Jupiter and trine Saturn and Neptune on Monday. So we have these beautiful trines with the moon in Cancer all weekend that is bringing a lot of emotional nourishment. It's bringing a lot of emotional care. It's bringing a lot of deeper emotional connection. It's bringing a lot of passion. It's bringing a lot of, harmony and balance. This beautiful grand water trine, these aspects that are these trines that are being made amongst the water signs, right? Where we're feeling emotionally nourished, we're feeling safe, we're feeling like connecting with our family, we're feeling like we're healing our relationship with the past. We're feeling good about where we're going or where we've come from in some type of way. This is a very good energy. But we also got to keep in mind, we do have that Mercury and Mars, or that, well, actually, no, Uranus, so that Uranus Mars opposition starts to dissipate on Sunday, because Uranus goes back into Taurus. And even though Uranus and Mars are opposite each other, still within like 4 degrees, they're not in like a sign-based opposition anymore. So Uranus is in Taurus, right? Uranus is no longer in Gemini, opposing Mars by sign. Uranus is in a sign where he's a little bit more grounded, a little bit more stable. I don't know if you could say that with Uranus, but he is a little bit more calm, a little bit more patient, a little bit more slow energetically when he's in Taurus. His energy, it's kind of like Uranus And Uranus does pretty well in Gemini. In Gemini, he's allowed to just do his thing in an air sign, right? When he's in Taurus, though, he kind of has to slow down. He kind of gets grounded a little bit. So I think the Uranus Mars opposition with Uranus going into Taurus, um, starting the weekend is going to be it's going to that the opposition is going to dissipate. And we're not feeling so frantic. We're not feeling so triggered. But Mars and Mercury are, they're sitting in a conjunction. They're going to be conjoining each other. They were 3 degrees away from each other this weekend. Mars at 3, Mercury stationed at 6 because he starts retrograding on Sunday, going backwards. So we're going to have this Mercury retrograde Mars conjunction that we're going to be moving into next week with. So we just need to be mindful of that energy. It's going to be a little triggering. It's going to be a little spicy, that Mercury Mars energy. But all in all, the weekend with the moon in Cancer feels very good. It feels very nourishing. It feels very balanced. I also will say, I do think there's going to be good, abundant, blessed opportunities coming from this full moon in Taurus. I do think this full moon in Taurus is going to be bringing new income, new sources of wealth, new jobs for some people, new passions, new something. It does feel like this full moon in Taurus. I don't know why I'm getting, even though full moons are not known to bring new things, there's something about this new moon, I'm sorry, this full moon in Taurus on Wednesday, bringing some new life, bringing something abundant, bringing a breath of fresh air. There's something about it bringing something new. And I really think we're going to see some of these opportunities, some of these magic, some of these blessings. We're going to see this weekend, starting on Saturday, going all the way through Monday, actually. We're going to see it all the way into Monday. So, don't be surprised if on Monday morning you wake up with some good news. There's a phone call, there's a message that comes in. There's just like some good news that you get. It could be around health. It could be, something happened for your family or for a cousin or for a friend that went really well, right? That went great. It could be some kind of new expansive opportunity, something. I'm seeing it on Monday because the moon's going to be sitting with Jupiter, and the moon Jupiter in this beautiful grand trine with Saturn. So there's something new. I don't know. I'm just getting that there's like good, new, abundant stuff coming this weekend. We're going to see it with the full moon in Taurus, but we're really going to see it with the week throughout the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday with the moon transiting Cancer. Okay. What I will say though, we just got to be very mindful of what hurts right now, of what makes us irritated, what pisses us off. We got to be that energy, like whatever hurts, whatever pisses you off, whatever is irritating you right now, you got to investigate that because there's something there for you. That energy is there because there's something that needs to be addressed. There's something that needs to be worked through. There's a problem that needs to be figured out. There's something that you got to deal with. There's something that you got to confront. There's something that you got to take action towards, which is why you're feeling that energy. You're feeling irritated, okay? You're feeling angry. You're feeling bothered by something. You're feeling frustrated. That energy, you are experiencing that because there's something that you got to take on. There's something that you got to address or something that you got to like take action toward in your life, okay? If you're feeling that, especially going into the weekend or coming out of this full moon in Taurus. Okay? All right. Let's breathe. Let's take a breath of air. Okay? I've been just talking. I don't know how I do it. I don't know how I talk for this long. Just yapping, just yapping. Professional yapper over here. When I worked in banking, there was this lady. She was like a recurring client of mine. She was so sweet. She was so funny. She's like, "Baby, you know what? You got the gift of the gab." I was like, "What do you mean by that? I never heard of that." She's like, "You could just talk and talk and talk, and people don't even know what you're talking about half the time, but they like the way you saying it." I was like, "You right. I like that. The gift of the gab." So true. So, all right, my loves, we have our Mercury retrograde starting on Sunday. This is going to be a very interessante Mercury retrograde. It's Mercury retrograde in Sag in his fallen or his detrimental state. So Mercury does not do that well in Sag. Whenever a planet is in the sign opposite of its rulership, it doesn't do that well. And this is a very easy way to remember. It's a shortcut way to remember when what planets are in detriment, which means they're out of their comfort zone. They're in a sign that they don't operate well in. Okay, whenever a planet is in a sign opposite of the sign that it rules, it is going to be in detriment. So, for instance, let me explain. The sun rules Leo. If you put the sun in Aquarius, opposite of the sign of its home, which is Leo, it's going to be in detriment. The moon finds its home in Cancer. It rules the sign of Cancer. You put the moon in the sign opposite of its home sign, Cancer, in Capricorn, that's where it's in its detriment. Virgo, ruled by Mercury. Mercury rules the sign of Virgo, right? Mercury in Virgo, that's its home sign. You put Mercury in Pisces, the sign opposite of its home, it's in detriment, or actually, it's actually considered fallen. So Mercury's actually fallen in the sign of Pisces. Mercury's considered exalted in the sign of Virgo. It's a very easy shortcut way to remember detriment or planets that are in domicile or in their rulership or in their home sign, or planets in detriment, right? When they're in a weak sign, they're in a sign that they're not comfortable in. Every planet opposite the sign of its rulership is always going to be uncomfortable in the opposite sign. Always. So Venus, she rules Taurus, she rules Libra. So she's always going to be uncomfortable or in detriment when she's in Aries or Scorpio, which are the signs opposite of the signs that she rules, right? A very easy way to remember that. So just a shortcut way to remember that, okay? But Mercury, so yeah, we're gonna have Mercury in Sag, Mercury in a weak state. We're gonna have Venus in Scorpio, Venus in a weak state, um, starting this week. Okay. Venus, well, Mercury's been in Sag since last week, but Mercury's going to start retrograding this week on Sunday. And then Venus, she enters Scorpio where she's going to be in her detrimental state, right? So when planets are in their detrimental state, they are in signs that they do not operate in a comfortable way in. So, we don't get as many of their good significations. We get more of their challenging, negative significations. So, Venus and Scorpio. When Venus is in Scorpio, she gets betrayed, she gets heartbroken, she gets deceived, right? That's what Venus is about. That's why Venus is in detriment in Scorpio, because Scorpio is a sign of control, passion, desire, but also betrayal, heartbreak, loss, things like this. And then Mercury is the planet of the mind and information. He goes into detriment in Sagittarius because Sagittarius is a sign of beliefs. It's more about our opinions, it's more about not what we think, it's what we believe. So this is why we get with Mercury and Sag, we get people forming opinions or ideas that's not based off of information. It's more about their belief and their opinion and what they think. It's very Mercury and Sag. I've noticed when people have that Mercury placement, they can be very opinionated around their beliefs, or they can form opinions based on beliefs that aren't really rooted in information. They can be very prejudiced, they can be very biased, they can have very extreme beliefs as well. But Mercury's in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is a sign that we kind of expect, because it's ruled by Jupiter, we expect like moral purity and clarity in a certain type of way. But Mercury and Sag, when Mercury's in Sagittarius, Mercury's being held to Sagittarius standard of being truthful and being honest. And sometimes Mercury and Sag, that truth and that honesty that comes with Mercury, placed there, can be kind of detrimental. It can be very destructive, or it can be very painful, or it could cause a lot of friction in people's lives. So, yeah. Mercury does not do that well in Pisces and Sagittarius. Mercury doesn't do well in Jupiter signs, and Jupiter doesn't do well in Mercury signs, which we learned a lot about with Jupiter and Gemini last year, up until this year, right? And last year, we learned a lot about that Jupiter and Gemini, about Jupiter losing his moral compass when he's in the sign of Gemini, and not being very clear and honest, and losing his integrity when he's in the sign of Gemini, which is why he goes into his detrimental state there. So. Okay, my loves, but thank you for participating. Thank you for being here for the Week Ahead Astro. Had a lot of fun today. We just have like a lot of astrology. So let's do a little recap real quick, okay, of everything that's happening this week, astrologically. There's a lot going on this week. Okay, Mars goes into Sagittarius tomorrow on Thursday or on Tuesday, okay, on November 4th. We have our full moon in Taurus on Wednesday morning, okay, on November 5th. We have Venus going to Scorpio on November 7th, which is going to be, I believe, what is that? Friday. Yeah, Friday, November 7th. We have Mercury retrograde that starts on Sunday, okay, which is going to be on the 9th. And then we have Mars going to Sagittarius. Did I say that already? We have Mars go into Sag on November 4th. Did I say that already? I might have said that already. So Mars goes into a new sign, Venus goes into a new sign, Mercury starts retrograding. Oh, and then also on Saturday, Uranus goes back into Taurus. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of energetic shift, a lot of energetic changes that are happening this week. So, if this week feels a little intense, if this week feels like you're being pulled in multiple directions, if this week feels very like, what the heck is going on? It just feels like there's a lot of change, or it just feels like energetically ungrounded. Well, now you know why. Okay. All right. But I love you all so much. Mwah. Have a beautiful, blessed day. I don't know why, but I can't see anybody typing anything anymore. I don't know if you guys are typing things or saying things, but I don't know what happened with the live, but I can't see it on Instagram Live. So it's okay. It happens. Things happen. But I love you all so much. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Everyone that donated today, I appreciate you guys so much. I'm gonna go ahead and post this on Instagram. Oh, I'm sorry, on Instagram, obviously, but on my YouTube, and I'll be sharing the YouTube link. So if you're not following me on YouTube yet, please go ahead and follow me there. Because I am doing my best. I'm doing my best, okay, to expand my social media presence and stuff like this. I am taking some time off from doing readings, so I don't know how long it's gonna be. Um, Anywhere from 3 weeks to a month, maybe even longer. I'm not really sure. The way that I relate to my work and the way that I do readings is dramatically shifting and changing. Um, I am just not going to be making myself so accessible to people. And I'm not going to be making myself so readily available. Energetically speaking, I go through cycles with my work where I'm like doing readings, I'm doing tons of readings every week, and I'm hustling, and then I burn myself out and I get exhausted and I get tired, and then I become a recluse. And, it's just this like pattern that I've been in for quite a few years now. And I need to like, figure that out. So I just need to take some time away from readings. I also have been feeling like my work just needs to evolve. The way that I do business, the way that I share my work, the way that I, connect to clients, it needs to evolve so it's more sustainable for me energetically. And it's like an energy thing. It's like, I get so exhausted and tapped out from doing readings for people back to back. My psychic muscle, my energetic muscle gets tapped out, and I need to just figure that out. So that's why I'm taking some time away, to kind of just recuperate and rejuvenate my energy, to replenish my psychic senses. And my availability is just not going to be the way it was before. I'm not going to have an open calendar the way I did before. It just doesn't make sense for me and the way how my work is energetically evolving. One of the things I've also realized, and which Spirit has been telling me, is like, it really is a privilege to work with me. And I'm gonna be way I'm just moving into a direction of where I and want to be way more intentional with how I give readings, and I also want to be more intentional with who I'm doing readings for. So it's not so getting a reading with me is not it's I'm not just gonna be accessible to anybody and everybody moving forward. There's going to be a lot that's going to change with how I go about relating to my clients, and I want to be more intentional with, my work and how I'm sharing my magic with the world and how I'm sharing my magic with clients. And this is going to be looking like people not having as much access to me and my calendar not being as open as it was before. And this is just to kind of protect myself and to protect my energy. Because I've had some experiences over the last few months that have just kind of, I don't know, have left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. But it's also me realizing that those experiences, I had to have those experiences because Spirit is showing me that my work needs to evolve, and the way that I share my work and where needs to evolve. And also, I'm evolving. I'm going through like an evolution. I'm going through like a big change. Like, you know, um, the way that I relate to the astrology and tarot and even my own spiritual journey, all these things are taking me in a new direction and stuff. And Yeah, I just need to give myself some space and some time and some peace and some clarity so I can really see what this new evolutionary process is and see where it's taking me and things like that. So love you all so much though. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate your continued love and support. Just stay tapped in with me on my stories and on my page because I'll let you all know when I'm open for readings again. But yeah, as of now, I'm taking some time away just to be in my own energy and be in my own space, and to really figure out what my next steps are going to be when it comes to like my work and everything like that. So, okay. I love you all so much. Have a beautiful, blessed day. I'll see you guys around. Hope you have a wonderful week ahead. Happy full moon in Taurus. And yeah, I'll see you guys around. Okay. Have a good one. Bye.